Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It is the 31st of March, the last day of March in 2025. And I think it's what? This makes it 2 months and about 10 days into the Trump administration. But in Doge years, I think it's 75.
I was
So,
I was gonna say for the liberal friends and family of mine, it feels like a lot more than 2 months. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
exactly. So, and with us here tonight is the fantastic guest that we are fortunate to have on with us tonight and every so often as well, Dave Huguenel, who is what knows the political scene, knows Oregon's political scene, and has also worked with the Trump campaign in the past, and has a unique view that we always appreciate having on the show. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Sorry it's been a while, but as we were just saying, it's been life has been a little crazy. So glad
Well,
it's slowing down enough I can join you.
good crazy, and I think that the last time we talked was January 7th, right after the new year, but before the new administration came into office. It was sort of the anticipation stage and the final moments of the Biden administration as it dwindled to a trickle and then disappeared. And but then came the not the fire hose, but the full-on fire hydrant of the Trump administration on day one, and it hasn't relented since then. And you've watched this, not only unfold in the political sphere, but also just seeing all the electeds and everybody that you're connected with. And for a little while, people don't pay as much attention to just pure politics of things because the governance stuff just takes over, right? And it just floods the zone with news and information. But then it also itself starts to take on its own political significance. And I think tomorrow, is it tomorrow? When's the election in Wisconsin? There's a Supreme Court race that's really important. Then there's the Florida special election that's going on for Congress, and then and then there's just like the what I'm trying to remember her name. It was nominated for UN ambassador. I'm just blanking on her name right now.
Elise Stefanik, yep.
Elise Stefanik, and then they pull that back, and so there's some political winds shifting out here in Oregon. We've got people literally foaming at the mouth, mostly senior citizens who've been told that their Social Security is going to be taken away, and that Elon Musk is stealing money from all of us. And it's being not advanced just by the loose affiliation with the Truth Left. It's Val Hoyle and Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley and all the way up to the national level, where there's literally people just telling big fat whoppers every day and getting everybody worked up to the point that they light Tesla dealerships on fire on a regular basis.
That's a very normal hobby, Kevin. I'm not. I mean, for what it's worth, I don't want you to drag on these Tesla firebombers too much. I remember, it's a thing for me. Like me and my family, if it's a Saturday, we'll go have a picnic. Me and the kids will jump in the car. We'll go find a Tesla dealership. Throw some like that's just good family fun.
Yeah, little stop at the gas station, fill up Coke bottles with the gasoline, stick kids the rags in there, race off to the Tesla dealership.
Very normal behavior. Nothing they should see a therapist about at all.
I didn't see it, but I heard it because I get to listen to like Fox News on the satellite radio when I'm driving around, of some guy that went and keyed, I think, or tried to spray paint a swastika on some guy's car, and the guy chased him down and confronted him. And the guy acted like, well, you got to understand, I don't hate you or your car. I just, I have a problem with Elon Musk, and I didn't really mean it. And it's like, he just did, and it didn't even work. Like, he tried to spray paint, it didn't work. And I'm just like, this is a derangement that goes beyond just pure Trump derangement. It is Uh,
Well, and I think there's a reason for that, right? We saw Trump derangement syndrome in the first administration. The difference between the first administration and this one, the first administration kind of had all of the talk but none of the walk, right? Like
yeah.
the first administration was ineffective, as most administrations are, right? That's
Yeah.
not a knock on Trump specifically. Most administrations, especially a first term one, they're kind of learning how everything works.
But
This administration,
especially Trump, since he didn't know DC
right?
that well, and he had the Russia hoax investigation and all these things hanging over him, right?
This go around, they have the same Trump that all the folks on the left love to hate, but this Trump is effective and he's getting stuff done. And unlike other administrations, even the most experienced administrations, whether you're going to like Obama or Bush or Clinton or Reagan or go as far back as you want, this administration is moving at lightning speed.
Yeah.
So that I think is adding this new level of derangement for these folks, where not only do they have to suffer an executive order where Trump names the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, which is basically that's basically the apocalypse for these blue-haired people. We rename a body of water.
Like
right. But now they have to deal with Doge going in and cutting some serious stuff. And I want to talk about Doge for a second, because this is where I think the left, and specifically the elected officials on the left, are really missing the boat. Might not be the case in Oregon, where frankly, like, you're surrounded by more blue-haired people than we are in the normal states out here on the East Coast or in the Midwest. But I have a lot of friends that are just not involved in politics. I would say these are low information voters. They don't spend a lot of time looking at stuff like you and I look at, or like maybe even some of the folks that are listening tonight that are probably a little more politically astute. They don't engage in politics at all. One of the things that I've heard consistently is that how much they like what Doge is doing, that they're cutting, because here's the thing. No one thinks that government is efficient and spends money well. Like, no one, find me that person says, you know what, government does an A+ job. That person doesn't exist, even on the left, right? So the problem that the Democrats have is that they are, in essence, by pushing against Doge, they're putting themselves in a position where they are defending government waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
They're defending the indefensible, and some of them are even defending the legitimacy of the attacks on the Tesla dealerships. They're really actually saying, like, well, we don't like violence, but those people are really upset because he's a real enemy of the people and all this stuff. So,
and look, and this actually just went public today. I'm actually reading the tweet that came out from Doge. As of Friday, this past Friday, $4.3 billion, billion with a B, $4.3 billion of COVID era funds remained unused and dormant. So the Department of Labor is clawing that money back, basically. $4.3 billion basically put on a shelf somewhere that just wasn't being, that was allocated, but basically like sitting, like wasn't accounted for. Right?
Yeah.
That to me is a travesty. And there's all sorts of examples like that. They've canceled contracts for cotton consultants in Uzbekistan. They've canceled contracts for folks that were teaching, how to, increase diversity in the workplace in Madagascar. These aren't weird examples. Like, these are all real things that they cut. No one thinks that these are all, unless you're the consultant for the Uzbekistan cotton farmers, these aren't the best ways to spend American tax dollars. Most average Americans understand that. Democrats have put themselves in a position where they're now defending that type of behavior. That's the problem they're running into. Oh, but it looks like Kevin may have just crashed. So he will be joining us shortly, hopefully. And I guess I'm on the show by myself. If you're watching this and you're looking at a straight frozen face of Kevin like I am, so make for an interesting show. Hopefully he will join soon. Yep, he did froze. Okay, thank you, Lori. So it looks like it is just me on here at the moment. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. If there's anyone watching, there's any questions, I'll try to answer questions while we wait for Kevin. I can certainly do that. I'm also texting Kevin frantically to figure out what to do here. He left me alone all by myself. So, all right. So, Lori, so how do we convince people mail-in voting is bad? It's a good question. I think that in some states, the elected officials have done a good job of not necessarily saying that vote by mail is bad, but creating more and more safeguards to stop fraud from happening. Like I know in my personal um in my personal state of Georgia, it's a lot. I don't want to say more difficult to vote by mail. It's a lot harder to cheat than vote by mail. Now in Oregon, I think what's interesting there is you just saw what starting last year where they admitted because of the motor voter stuff, they've registered thousands of illegal immigrants to vote. That to me is a really big problem. I think in Oregon, at a minimum, there should be more education as to like what can be done to stop the wrong people from voting. Looks like we have Kevin, but like you're weird colors, man. This is trippy.
I don't know what that is.
I mean, let's roll with it. Let's roll.
Let me remove myself and add myself back in. Hold on a second.
I mean, I'm totally okay with whatever that was. All right, very Oregonian of him to show up like an LSD. No, you're still no, he's back. He's gone. He's back. But yeah, Lori, it's long story short. I think it's the problem with vote by mail. It's very hard to unring the bell. Once you have it, it's hard to really stop it. I guess we have Kevin back.
I'm back. Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you for continuing. You're actually now officially a co-host. I don't know if you've just been promoted.
I don't know. I was doing the best I could.
There's so many examples of what you were given. Literally, you probably just kept going with examples while.
Well, so I actually opened up for questions, and Lori asked, about vote by mail and how do we convince people it's bad, and the issue. Basically, to wrap that up, I think the biggest issue you have with vote by mail is once a state enacts it, it's very hard to get rid of it. It's very difficult. So what you really have to do is do as much as you can to make sure that there's laws and regulations in place to stop the wrong people from getting on the rolls and being eligible to receive a vote by mail ballot. And Oregon is, not, I used to honestly say Oregon was one of the better states. I think what happened last year with motor voter and those illegal immigrants being put on the rolls, they've gone down a few notches, and I think there's some work to be done in Oregon to improve it there.
Yeah, and I think what's happened is at one time there were standards that even Oregon had for its vote by mail, and they've watered those standards down and actually made it match some of the lax standards that exist in other states.
Right.
Between 2020 and 2024, they actually made it so that ballots could actually arrive up to a week after election day, and all these things that were cited as, well, we don't do that in Oregon, so we've got it right here. And then they went and they duplicated those mistakes, and then and of course we know that in Oregon with the election system, the real issue that we need to get to the bottom of is who's in the voter rolls. Because we did have an issue last year where they found several thousand people who were not citizens but were registered to vote. They found them. Then they stopped the automatic voter registration system temporarily because they said, we don't know how to stop it. And then they said, oh, there's an election. Let's have an election. And then they had 55,000 people that they identified that they couldn't prove were citizens, but were receiving ballots. And that's the last we heard of it.
Right. Well, and I should say this too. I mean, in a perfect world, which we don't live in, but in a perfect world, I'm not opposed to vote by mail voting. Right. In fact, in Oregon specifically, vote by mail was actually kind of put forward by Republicans, in the mid-aughts, if I recall, right? I think it was around 2006 that they initiated a study, I think, on it.
Well, it was voted in 1998.
Was it? Oh, it was earlier than that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I thought it was the mid-aughts, but
it was the first state to do it, and it's true that that Republicans don't have a very good record of winning statewide elections since then. But it is also the case that if you have messy voter rolls and people get on them, if you never go and do anything to examine that and create standards for it, then they say, well, it's a complaint-driven system. So if you can find somebody that's a phony on the voter rolls and prove it, then you can try to file a complaint, except that's almost impossible.
well, and this is, I mean, because what I was about to do is kind of give those Republicans that passed, I guess. So I guess in the 90s, I was going to give them a little bit of credit, but then I was going to dog on them a little bit. And the credit I'd give them, because one of the theories that they had about vote by mail is that it was actually going to be a big money saver for the state, because they wouldn't have as many election workers and polling locations and things like that. I can't remember what the number was. I used to know it. Someone told me once, but it saved the state money. The problem that I think they did a bad job of thinking about was twofold. One is exactly what you just put on there, is vote by mail fundamentally only works if you have a good voter roll that is accurate.
Yeah.
And ballots are being sent where they need to be sent. If that's not the case, then vote by mail breaks down pretty quickly. The second issue is what you alluded to prior to that, which is, you have these elections. We as a country, it's like we don't have election day anymore. We have election week, right?
Or month.
Or month in some cases. Now, while the taxpayers don't necessarily directly deal with that cost, there is a huge expense on campaigns, because for all these campaigns, like, if you're running a campaign with in a state like California is a really good example, but Oregon to a certain extent, right? You have to have lawyers on the ground ready to file these challenges and file these complaints. Those lawyers, for the most part, some of them volunteer, a lot of them don't. You have to have this paid organization around you. It also means you're having to go to court more often to challenge these ballots. And now you're kind of bogging down the court system with more cases. It's it's not as, I mean, I remember going back to some of the first campaigns I ever worked on in Louisiana in like 2006, 2007. We knew who won within a couple hours of the polling locations closing.
And they know that in Florida now. Remember good old Florida that used to take weeks and had dimpled chads, and they get it done the same night.
Exactly. And guess what? They have vote by mail in Florida. They have absentee, they have early voting, all that sort of stuff. Like most states do. I mean, even when I got started, I mean, there's always some form of absentee voting. Louisiana has had early voting for a very long time. That's in-person early voting. So like you can go and vote at your county clerk's office a week prior to the election, or 2 weeks prior, something like that. There are plenty of ways to make sure that these things happen quickly. But that's one of the things that I think they really missed the boat on, is it's not good for democracy for us to have to wait a month to figure out who won.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, especially when elections are close and these fights drag on for a month trying to figure out who actually won this thing, it really kind of eats at the fundamentals of what a democracy is. It is hard if you're on the losing side, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you're on the losing side of an election like that, it's hard for you to trust the system. It's easy to believe that there was something nefarious that happened that caused your person to lose. And and that is something that I think is just really, really toxic for a democracy. Like, we have to have a more efficient voting system.
Well, and especially when you have ballots that are still arriving and being counted after at least preliminary results are known, which causes people to just not trust and want more certitude that this isn't a system that's being manipulated after election day by ballots that are showing up and coming in and being counted and recounted. Now, I will say that Florida cleaned up its election rolls. Florida also did something else that everybody should think about if they are serious, because Ron DeSantis was elected in 2018 by like less than 1%. I think it was like 0.75% he won the governorship. Then he won it by 19 points 4 years later. And between the time when he came into office in 2020 and 2024, they registered 1 million Republican voters. A million. So, you know, we aren't doing that enough in Oregon. I think we know that. And so what you have to do is you have to just way outvote them. Like, you have to make the numbers so much in your favor that they can't cheat enough. You have to, overcome the margin of potential fraud with how you vote. And we don't really do that here. We've got a huge number of people, non-affiliated voters, that whose participation rate is low. Right. And there's no concerted effort to register those people as Republicans right now.
Well, and I think part of the challenge too, and I saw this when I worked for Governor Christie in New Jersey. I saw it even to a certain extent with Bobby Jindal in Louisiana when he got elected, because we had just gone through, you know, a term of Kathleen Blanco,
Yep.
I should say.
Yeah, Blanco.
Yeah. You know, the issue that you have in states is it's like there's almost like a chicken and an egg issue. Once you have the governorship, it is a lot easy to build a healthy and robust state party that has resources to go out and do, you know, massive voter registration. It's very difficult to do that if you don't control at least a branch of government, but especially the governor's office, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard for you to get the governor's office if you're not out there doing the voter registration stuff. So that's kind of why I say it's a bit of a chicken and egg issue. Look, I think that, you know, when it comes to the unaffiliated voters in Oregon, one of the biggest mistakes in politics that I see so many people make is they'll look at voter registration rolls and they'll see a certain percentage are Republican, a certain percentage are Democrat, and then this massive chunk that's undecided. And they think that those are unaffiliated. And they look at those unaffiliated and they think that those must be like moderate or swing voters. Couldn't be further from the truth. If you go and talk to those voters, they are potentially just as conservative as you and I, or just as liberal as some of our misguided friends, right? You know, they have strong opinions. They just haven't expressed that in their party registration.
Yeah.
What you are seeing nationally right now, and the other thing I'd say too is like registration, you know, in terms of who decides to register Republican, Democrat, it kind of moves in these tectonic shifts. I think I've talked about on the show before, right? Where, you know, we talk about, you know, political realignments and de-alignments. We are very much going through a realignment right now where people are deciding, you know what, I'm a Republican, or you know what, I'm a Democrat. Right now, if you are college educated, if you're white, if you're a little bit older, if you have a higher income, you're probably deciding that you're a Democrat right now. At least most of them are on average. If you are Hispanic, if you are more of a blue collar person, or lower to lower middle class, if you live in rural areas, you're more likely now than ever to say that you're probably going to be a Republican. So you are seeing those trends. Even within Oregon, you're seeing some of those trends. It's not as obvious in Oregon for a couple of reasons. One is because of motor voter, right? People are automatically registered to vote. If they don't opt into a party, they're just listed on non-affiliated, right? So we're kind of like pushing people to be registered to vote before they're ready to make that jump. So it's kind of inflating your non-affiliated number or unaffiliated numbers a little bit. And then two, you also have people that are coming in from California and some other places that are kind of bumping that number up a little bit. But if you look at any other state in the country right now, it's very obvious that you're seeing in some states we call it non-affiliated, in other states we call it unaffiliated. You're seeing those numbers, at least in terms of like the percentage of like the pie chart, that's starting to go down a little bit, and it's becoming more Republican, more Democrat.
Yeah, it's starting to stratify more. And also over time, you gain some knowledge about those unaffiliated voters, which initially start out as unidentified voters, and then you identify more information about them and their voting patterns. and then maintain databases where you remember essentially what they've told you, or if they sign a petition saying they want to stop attacks from being passed or something like that, you get info. Now, James here on in the feed says estimated 40% of registered voters are inactive. Now, I have not heard 40%. However, when you say inactive, that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't voters. It means that they've fallen into a status because a lot of people move. They move from one place to another. They don't update their voter registration in time for the election. And many of them disproportionately reactivate themselves around major elections like presidential elections because they want to participate. And they're like, what? I didn't get a ballot. Give me a ballot. And but that's different than when you have more voters someplace than there are legal age people. And anyway, an audit of all this is going to be important. But I kind of want to get back to when we were talking at the beginning about these mega trends. You were talking about the tectonic shifts in voters. There's also when the pendulum swings, right? The pendulum swung way our direction this election compared to some more recent elections. In fact, it was the first time that a Republican president won the popular vote in 20 years, right? Yeah. But I also remember 2005 very well. And 2005 was not a good year for Republicans. It was right after we had this big success in 2004, where we, in fact, had the trifecta. We had control of the federal government. We even had a slight majority on the Supreme Court and the presidency. And then we went in, and I remember George W. Bush, the first thing he tried to do was he tried to reform Social Security, and that collapsed within weeks.
Right.
And then it went to Abu Ghraib, and it went to the Iraq War wasn't going that well. It was the occupation. And then there was Katrina, which I'm sure you have strong recollections of as well.
Yep.
And that was not a good year. Now, the Democrats kind of regained their mojo and turned some of these issues into stuff that really put them in a good position in 2006 to win the House. And that's when we got Nancy Pelosi as speaker. So when we're looking at the political trends right now, what are we seeing? Even though this is very early, it's about 70 days into the administration, but the Democrats are trying to figure out if they can regain some momentum, if they can find some legitimate there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm on their side because they're just freaking out. But
right.
Is there anything where there's a sign that they might be making some kind of comeback or finding some way to gain leverage in the political sphere that's coming up?
Short answer is no. I don't think they've found it yet. Just this past weekend, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, was on the Bill Maher show, basically just saying that, look, our party's brand is in crisis right now. And you're hearing that from a lot of different Democrats. I think right now, the approval rating of the Democratic Party nationally is something in like 25, 26%, historically low for their party. They are trying, right? And I think with Doge, that was kind of their first big foray into trying to figure out if that was going to work for them. I'll say this: whatever Democrats are going to run on, I don't think it's happened yet.
They haven't found it, right? They are trying to firm up their base, though, right? Yeah. And part of that 25% popularity rating is a loss. It's sort of disarray and disillusionment and disappointment in their party, but some of those people think that they aren't progressive and rabid enough, and they went after Chuck Schumer for simply letting a vote happen in the U.S. Senate. That was probably a smart political move.
Well, I want to clarify. Not only have the Democrats not found the issue yet that they're going to run on in 2026, I'm saying whatever that issue is, I don't think it's actually happened yet either. Right? They haven't had their like using 2005. Abu Ghraib hasn't happened yet. Katrina hasn't happened yet. Right. Yeah. These are things that are, whatever the big world or national events are, that sway public opinion one way or the other for the 2026 midterms. I just don't think it. I don't think it's happened. I don't. I actually, and I'll admit I might be wrong about this, but my hot take is I don't think Doge is going to be the center of the election in 2026.
I think you're right, and I think demonizing Elon Musk isn't carrying any weight with the swing voters and the electorate that will tune in sometime in late 2026. I think it has gotten their base rallied, and now they have somebody that they hate, but that doesn't mean you get much beyond just the progressives as a electoral base. While at the same time, what you really need is you need to find something where it's like you start to draw blood on the other side and they start playing defense, and that's not happened yet, right?
I agree. I agree that it hasn't happened yet. Democrats are definitely kind of having an identity crisis right now. I think, if you go and look, and look, I spend a lot of time watching Democrats, and I know it probably pains some of your viewers to go and do that, but I really do recommend. I do recommend to people that you go and listen and watch to what Democrats are saying, because it's fascinating. And Gavin Newsom right now, I think, is frankly one of the smarter Democrats out there, at least politically. I'm not saying he's a great governor.
He's trying to be smart.
I think he at least understands the problem, right? I think there's a lot of Democrats in Washington, D.C. that don't even understand the problem what they're facing is. They also think that this is just a rehash of the first Trump administration, and they can just dust off that old playbook. I don't think that works for them either.
Well, I think some Democrats actually think that trans rights or what they portray as trans rights and the whole agenda around that is the equivalent of abortion. And they did play the abortion card in 2024. It worked in some places, but a lot of places it didn't work as well as I hope. But there are still Democrats that are doubling and tripling down on some of the most objectionable policies that alienated voters in 2024. Right. And those people basically have to be Peter principled out of influence in the Democrat Party before things get better, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think something like abortion policy, I mean, that'll always be kind of a part of any election, right? It's a super passionate issue. It's high passions on both sides. Again, I think the other problem that Democrats are going to have, though, is Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. It had what I thought was a very very big impact in the 2022 cycle. I think we would have picked up more seats as Republicans if Roe v. Wade wasn't overturned, right? It kind of really amped up their base a lot. In 2024, it didn't do a whole lot for him. I think but in 2024, they were saying, listen, if Trump's in the White House and Republicans control the Senate and the House, they're going to take your right to, they're going to do a national ban on abortion. That's basically what Democrats were saying. If that doesn't happen, and I don't think there's no sign of it. There's any desire from the White House or from the Senate. No one except for a few folks in Congress are really trying to push a national abortion ban. If that doesn't happen, then all those voters that Democrats scared into thinking that a right of theirs was being taken away by the federal government are going to say, wait, no, this isn't the thing that I should be afraid of, and they're going to look at other things. Is my basic theory. And another way of saying it is, like, there's a bit of a half-life to the abortion issue, right? Where it was super big with Roe v. Wade.
It was radioactive, so half-life is a good guess.
And it'll slowly die down as long as there isn't something new. Like we're not pumping new uranium into it, right?
Yeah. So every 2 years, it reduces by 50% the effect it has on swing voters, and then so 6 years afterwards, it's basically going to be back to what it was, which is not a dominant issue, but not an irrelevant issue. I think the same thing is kind of happening with climate change to some extent. That one has lost a lot of its oomph. And
a really good solution to climate change is actually destroying places that sell electric vehicles. That's obviously a very good idea.
Yeah, that one works great, especially since the flames that go up into the air, they're not polluting anything.
Right.
And plus, what the other thing is? It's letting our forests burn is great for climate change. So there's a lot of things that are starting to get addressed that the Democrats are on the wrong side of. I think that what they are gonna, if they're smart, the thing they're gonna aim for, it's usually an overreach, a policy that they can assign negative attributes to that stick, or some kind of consequence that for voters that they can then blame the party in power for, and the party in power can't say no, it's not us or it's something else credibly to voters.
Right.
So one of the things would be the economy. I know there's a lot of talk about whether tariffs are going to have a significant negative effect or not, and it may actually have some slowdown effect in the short run. But then there's 18 things being done to get the economy up and running and to juice it up here in the United States, like deregulation and fast tracking investment and getting government out of the way of these businesses and inviting foreign investment back in. Now, inflation, stopping the thing that they were doing during the Biden administration that actually increased inflation. All these funds that they were sending out there that was spending money and essentially trying to press the accelerator on the inflation pedal that Biden's administration was doing. Those funds are actually being kind of pulled back right now. A lot of it's being canceled. So I know it's really bad for left-wing nonprofits and NGOs, but it's not bad for the economy, a lot of it. And so it remains to be seen. Like, to some extent, the president can't just order the economy to be healthy, but it is kind of his thing to be good at the economy, right?
Very true. I mean, one of the this is a political science professor I had in college, which I'm not going to say how long. I'm getting old enough now that I don't want to say when I was in college because it's starting to make me sad. But he said something that always stuck with me, which was that government fundamentally only does two things: it subsidizes and it taxes. That's all it does, right? And you subsidize things that you want, and you tax things that you don't want, right? So, for example, we want to have a strong national defense. That's why government pays for the military. That is, in effect, a subsidy. We want to have good interstates to drive on. The government, builds roads. That's a subsidy for transportation. We don't want Taiwan making our microprocessors. We're going to put a tariff on it, or we're going to do things that incentivize or subsidize people building microprocessors and microchips and things like that in the United States. Same thing with the automobile industry and things like that. Anytime the government subsidizes or taxes, it's going to have some sort of effect, either pro or converse, on the economy, right? I think with Trump, especially when it comes to tariffs and things like that, is there a potential for short-term price increases that are painful? Yes. Like if you add a tariff, then that cost will get passed down to the consumer. The long-term effect of it, I think, is fundamentally subsidizing what we want as a country, which is we want as America, we want to be building things that are important to us, whether it's important things for national security and defense, like microprocessors, whether it's things like automobiles that create really great middle-class jobs. I think that's what I think government lost sight of over the last 30, 40 years is we kind of gotten this, we got excited about the idea of globalism and consumerism, and we forgot that, if we're not careful, we're actually subsidizing offshoring American jobs, right? Which is why Detroit is now a ghost of what it once was. It's why America, which used to be the leading microprocessor manufacturer in the world, has given that up to Taiwan. So I think the long-term vision of what the Trump administration is trying to do makes complete sense. My only fear politically of it is that everyone's going to agree that this was a great job, a great thing to do 15, 20 years from now, which, from a political standpoint isn't soon enough. But that doesn't mean that he's not correct. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kevin, or I can't hear you anymore. There's no sound. I still can't hear you. If you're in the comments and you can hear Kevin, can you say something? Because I cannot hear him. Still can't hear you. Did I just like wax so intellectual and so smart on tariffs that I just made it to where like you're in silence now? Was I just that good? I don't. So Lori cannot hear you.
So audio
You're back.
input.
You're
There,
back.
I just changed a setting, and who knows? It's one of
All
those
right.
days. There's gremlins in here. See, if we made some of this technology in the United States, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think that yeah, it's the 18-month time period where maybe the economy will slow. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Should be able to hear me.
Yeah, you should
Yeah,
be back now. I think there's a little bit of a lag,
yeah.
but we got you.
The 18-month time period where we're able to only do so much with the economy. If it slows down, a lot of that's in the hands of the Fed or the feelings and the hearts of consumers. And I do think getting energy prices down could have a short-term benefit because that's something that the Trump administration is committed to, and becoming energy dominant and unleashing that. Even that takes a while to kick in, though. It doesn't kick in like 2 months. It takes a while.
Right.
And I also think that even these companies that are coming in and investing billions of dollars now in production in the United States, it takes a while to get a factory stood up. So the 18-month window is a crucial window. Now, here's the thing. So I don't know if you heard Elon Musk's overview of the importance of maintaining control of the House of Representatives. He talked about it today, and I heard the audio of it. And he was talking about it in the context of the Florida special elections, and then in Wisconsin, where they've got a Supreme Court race that's like the most expensive in U.S. history for the state because of its implications for redistricting and 2 potential Republican seats that would go away through gerrymandering. And he said, so the House is very closely divided. We're still really like a razor thin thing, like, a car accident could change the outcome of the House of Representatives. It's that close, right?
It is that close, and I know I've got not me directly, but my company and some friends of mine are involved in the Florida special right now. So I'll be I've been paying very close attention to that one. It's interesting to see the amount of money pouring in from both sides into these. It's almost, there's almost like an analogy made in like, it's like Cold War, and like these are all like little Vietnams and Afghanistans, right? Where you've got these big political powers that are coming in on these like little relatively little races that they normally wouldn't do if they weren't specials. I'll say this: I tend not to look at special elections and say that things are pointing one way or the other, because special elections can be very weird. Turnout is very weird. The amount of money spent on them, which matters, is really weird. There are a lot of things where, like, if things go well for the Republicans tomorrow in these, that to me, it does not bear out that, hey, we've got good things in 2026.
Right.
Likewise, if Democrats win, it doesn't mean that it's bad things for us either. It just means
both sides will act like it does, and they'll try to get some mileage out of it and some donation.
No, trust me. If Republicans win tomorrow, like, my official point is gonna be like, yes, we're, I'll put on my hat and be the pundit that I need to be. But if I'm being completely honest, if I'm trying to horse race this stuff, I don't read a lot into specials. What frankly I would read more into are some of the regularly scheduled elections later this year in places like Virginia and New Jersey, where those are, granted, those are very much blue states. Even though Virginia has a Republican governor right now with Youngkin, it's still very much a blue state. New Jersey is obviously very blue, but still, there's going to be lessons to be learned out of those states. And New Jersey, to me, is specifically interesting because of how well Trump performed there last year. Trump didn't win the state of New Jersey, but the margin that he lost it by was astonishingly close. And he won counties that are extremely blue historically, like Passaic County and a few others that when I was watching, I remember on election night last year, I kind of stopped watching my client stuff, and I was just looking at New Jersey as a guy that used to work out there because like the numbers there were just weird. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if New Jersey, if that kind of trend keeps going. I don't think that you see the same numbers that you saw with Trump, but if you see places like Passaic County being slightly redder than they used to be, if you see South Jersey continuing kind of its red slide that it's been doing over the last few years, Central New Jersey as well, that's a really to me like that's more the canary in the coal
That could
mine
be a
than
big beginning of a trend, actually, or
yeah.
something that has some legs.
And those are much more like normal elections, right? Those are elections that are regularly scheduled. These states always have their elections every 4 years on odd number years, so the electorate's a little bit more predictable. People expect to vote in that one. Those are the ones that I'll be paying more attention to get a sense of it'll give me more clues to what 2026 is going to look like than what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, and there's another dynamic too, and it's the money dynamic, which takes a while to develop. It's Republicans had less money in 2024, but they also have an incumbent president who's kind of a money machine. If he kicks into gear doing that right now, I think he's super busy, basically sleeping 4 hours a night and governing everything. And there's so much going on there. I do wonder if some of the things that really aren't overtly intended to be political, but have major political implications, such as, all of this stuff that was going on in the last administration that perhaps had criminal consequences. There's a lot of crap they found with Doge. There are people who knew that was happening. There were people who knew they were doing that stuff. And there must be an absolutely gargantuan list of things to investigate over at DOJ now. And it's just 70 days in. That type of stuff can also begin to dominate a news cycle, right?
Right. It absolutely can. I don't know what the 2026 campaigns are going to be litigated on. But I feel very confident knowing that whatever it is, we don't know. It hasn't happened yet. I remember it was around this point in 2023, or maybe slightly after this point, kind of mid 2023, I think, when Kevin McCarthy was ousted as speaker, and it was Jim Jordan versus Scalise versus everybody, and everyone was convinced in that moment that was going to have a major impact on the 2024 election. And I told him, I was like, at that time, I was like, no, this is not going to be something like when Trump is on the ballot or Trump is in the White House, you have no idea what's in store the next day. And look, we went through, 2 attempted assassinations of Trump. After that, we went through, all sorts of craziness with the Biden administration. We went through so much stuff that by the time we got to November of 2024, most people forgot that Jim Jordan even ran for speaker, let alone almost won the thing, right? Same thing apply to this.
I would say a good example of this that's very recent is so-called Signalgate.
Yes.
I just was looking at the headlines from last Friday versus today. That's almost faded. In just 72 hours, it went from, Democrats saying, my God, people have got to go to jail for this and there need to be resignated. And now nobody cares.
Right.
It's 72 hours.
The signal chat stuff, that's a perfect example of that's Democrats kind of going after an issue. And look, it was unforced error. It does make sense for them to go after it. Are people going to be making up their mind on who they vote for next year based on that or what comes of that? Absolutely not. I don't think so. And guess what? We're going to have 50 other versions of Signalgate. And what I mean by that is something that kind of takes over the news cycle for a couple of days.
Yeah.
We'll probably, today's Monday. We'll have another one this week. We have no idea, right? And so if you're thinking about running for office, or if you are running for office, or if you're just trying to figure out what the hell is going on with elections, just know that, especially at this phase, you can't read too much into any one single event or any one single news story, because most of this is going to get buried by stuff that just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and I think that some of the people that get worked up about this are really just in political circles and inside the Beltway and the news. But
Yep.
regular folks don't give a crap. That's why I always come back to the economy. Sometimes wars and stuff can actually
Sure.
affect things, but those are hard to predict when those happen.
But even then, like when it comes to wars, I mean, you're talking about in terms of like our lifetime, like stuff that foreign policy that's directly affected elections, right? You're talking about 9/11, in the Iraq War, for the most part. That kind of happened, within a couple of years of each other. Those are, unless America is sending thousands of soldiers somewhere or we are attacked in some serious way, most foreign policy is something that Americans aren't devoting a ton of attention to. So I'd say they don't. Right. But it's not what they're making decisions off of. To your point, Kevin, it's going to be economics. Crime is also going to still be one. And then also, education, depending on where you're at. Economy, crime, education. Those are three issues where, I mean, look, people want to make sure their family's safe. They want to make sure their family's fed, and they want to make sure their kids can read.
Yeah.
If one of those three things isn't happening, then that's what they're going to be making their decision on.
Yeah, and some of that's solidly in the hands of local Democrat elected officials too. So it could the impact could be very different depending on what part of the country you're in,
right?
What the cause of that is, right? So I do think that it's been unusual for 70 days that Republicans and Trump in particular have been able to dominate and drive the headlines for so long. Because usually we don't actually get that much momentum and control. Democrats, desperate to get headlines, would start screaming their heads off at literally anything. Like the guy it wasn't State of the Union, but it was a similar type of speech that President Trump gave. And that one congressman who got himself kicked out from Texas, that's just he was just flailing. He was just trying to see if he could, get some attention and create and it didn't do anything. It didn't help the Democrats at all, did it?
No, not at all. Although I think Nancy Pelosi convincing all the female Democrats to wear pink, that obviously I think that's going to change the course of history significantly. More so than when she convinced them to all wear black or when they all wore white. I think it, she's testing different colors and seeing which color will get where voters are going to like her, because I didn't like her when she was wearing white, but now that she's wearing pink, she's got my vote.
Well, and there are little auction paddles where they were bidding in
that was great. Yeah.
Well, so what's your prediction for Wisconsin, for the Florida special elections, or I won't say projection. I know we've used a different word for that, but and where the next couple of months take us in terms of things like DOGE and the budget and so on in DC.
So I think the Lori said she wants them in orange. Cash Patel and the DOJ got to work on that.
Yeah.
I think tomorrow is going to be a mixed bag. Admittedly, I haven't spent a lot of time paying attention to Wisconsin. I've spent more time looking at Florida. I think Florida goes well tomorrow for Republicans. I think we win that one.
Anyway.
Yeah. I'm not sure that we win in Wisconsin. I wouldn't be surprised, just given the state and the dynamic, and it's also a Supreme Court race that doesn't go our way. So I think that we win some, lose some tomorrow would be my guess. The overall, message out of tomorrow, I think if you're gonna be, no, sorry, I can't speak. It's getting a little late. If you're a Democrat, you're gonna have some stuff that you can tout as like, here's our momentum. If you're a Republican, you're gonna have the same thing. So everyone's gonna have their trophy that they can bring home and show that they did something great. Fundamentally, I think that it all, again, my biggest message to anyone watching tonight is don't watch what happens tomorrow and think that is, foreshadowing what's going to happen in November of next year. It really won't. If anything, is foreshadowing in 2025. It's going to be some of the general elections that happen later this year in New Jersey and Virginia, and even then, those can be a little unique as well. So because those are very much local, they're governor, state legislative, that sort of stuff. There's some unique idiosyncratic stuff to those, but at least those are a little bit. Those to me have a little bit more of a trend that you can look at that play more into what the midterms are going to be, not what happens tomorrow.
And what's your wild prediction for the college football playoff?
Man,
I wouldn't have predicted Notre Dame last year in this last year around, but
I can say confidently my bracket is dead. I picked Alabama to win.
For the NCAA basketball, yeah, I got.
Yeah. So that was a so that was definitely a mistake on my part. And as an LSU fan, I should have known better to put my faith into the Tide. We're so March Madness for me is done. I have no idea who's going to win. I think all of my Final Fours are out. I think I've lost. So anything I say on basketball should be disregarded as absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got the same thing. But hey, look, spring games are starting for college football already. Somebody in the feed here said only 3 or 4 months until like practices or something like that. So
as an LSU fan, I won't even project. I'll predict. I expect to be extremely hopeful in August and very disappointed in October. So that is, save a couple of random years. That's generally how the process works. But it's good, and I'm trying to teach my young kids who are starting to watch football with me. The whole point of watching LSU football is you learn to like have you learn how to deal with hope dying, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
It's good to have hope, but you have to know what happens like when it's just absolutely pummeled and killed on live television. It's a really good sort of moral fortification that us folks from Louisiana get.
I told my kids for years with some of my sports teams, you learn how to be a real fan. You stick with them, even though, as you said, hope dies every year, but then you get excited again. Right.
Well, and I think there are times where, like, I wish that I was like a Rutgers fan, because like Rutgers fans should have no hope, right? There's no,
That's right.
They're never going to do anything. Sometimes I'm like jealous of them. The problem with LSU is that we are expected to do well and then we fail.
Yeah, I know that at Notre Dame too. It's
well, eventually maybe you guys will join a conference. You guys still haven't joined a conference yet, right?
Technically, we're like halfway into the ACC, but
that to me is criminal. I actually think DOJ needs to investigate Notre Dame not being a conference.
Well, we actually are. The CIA director is a Notre Dame grad, so remember what Schumer said about the intelligence community. So
yeah, fair enough.
Well, thanks for being on here tonight, Dave. It was great having you on. We really covered a lot, and thanks for everybody for putting up with the technical problems. You got to see me in 60s psychedelic for the very first time on this program, at least temporarily. And but you got to hear from Dave Huguenel, who shares a lot of insight and wisdom that you can't really get anywhere else. And we really appreciate you being with us, Dave.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, keep up the good fight. We'll keep fighting here in Oregon. And thanks to all of you for watching, and share the show with everyone you can. And we'll be back tomorrow night. I have a special show tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about what's happening with the initiative process here in Oregon. There's a bill in the state house that is our state senate that pertains to it. And we're going to get some special insight on that and other taxes they want to raise on you, straight from Chris Gray, young Republican who's with the Taxpayers Association, going to give us a briefing and tell you what you can do about it. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks again, Dave. And we'll see everybody on the next episode of the Cap.